The fluorescent lights in the all-night diner buzzed like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked vinyl booths and coffee-stained counters. It was 3:47 a.m., that dead hour when the world felt suspended between yesterday's failures and tomorrow's false promises. My feet ached in my worn sneakers, the kind of bone-deep pain that comes from 12-hour shifts and dreams deferred. The smell of burnt coffee and grease clung to my uniform, a pale blue dress that had seen better days, much like myself. I was invisible. That's what poverty does. It renders you transparent, a ghost moving through spaces occupied by people who matter. At 23, I'd perfected the art of disappearing, of keeping my head down and my mouth shut. Student loans I couldn't pay, a studio apartment I could barely afford, and tips that never quite covered the gap between surviving and living. This was my life, measured in quarters and dollar bills, in the weight of plates and the forced smile I wore like armor. The diner was nearly empty. A trucker nursed his third cup of coffee in the corner booth. An elderly woman with too much makeup and too little hope sat at the counter, her hands wrapped around a mug for warmth. And then there was the back booth, the one I'd learned to avoid. He'd arrived at midnight in a black Mercedes that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. I hadn't seen him enter. One moment the booth was empty, the next he occupied it like a king surveying conquered territory. 2 men flanked the entrance, their suits too well tailored to hide the bulges at their sides. Another stood by his car outside, speaking into his sleeve, eyes constantly scanning the dark street. I'd caught glimpses throughout my shift. Dark hair, expensive suit that whispered rather than shouted wealth, an aura of controlled danger that made the air around him feel charged. He didn't look at me when I refilled his coffee. Just a slight nod, a gesture so minimal it barely registered as acknowledgement. But I'd felt the weight of him, the way prey feels the presence of a predator even without direct eye contact. Papers covered his table, legal documents with dense text and colored tabs. A fountain pen that probably cost more than my rent lay across one stack. He read with absolute focus, occasionally making notes in margins with sharp, decisive strokes. No laptop, no phone on the table. Just him, the papers, and a stillness that seemed almost dangerous. Refill. I approached at 3:52 a.m., my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look up, just pushed the cup toward me with 2 fingers. His hands were elegant but scarred across the knuckles, beautiful and brutal all at once. I poured, careful not to spill, and was turning to leave when something caught my eye. The document facing me had a header in bold, Declaration of Bankruptcy. Below it, lines of legal text, and at the bottom, a signature line with an X marked in pencil where he was meant to sign. But above the signature block, in smaller print, I saw it. A discrepancy that made my heart skip. The entity name listed for bankruptcy was Castellano Enterprises LLC, Delaware Corporation, Certificate No. 782916. But 3 pages back, paper clipped to the stack, was another document, a transfer agreement showing the same assets now held by Castellano Holdings Trust, Certificate No. 4782961. The numbers were different. The structures were different. I shouldn't have been reading. I shouldn't have understood. But 3 years of business school before my scholarship dried up had taught me enough to recognize the trap. Someone had set him up. If he signed that bankruptcy declaration under the LLC name, but the assets were already in the trust, he'd be declaring bankruptcy for an empty shell, while leaving himself personally exposed to all the debt. His real assets would be unprotected. It was elegant fraud, the kind that required someone with inside knowledge and access to his papers. My hand trembled. The coffee pot rattled against his cup. Something wrong? His voice was low, textured like smoke over gravel. He still hadn't looked at me. I should have walked away. Should have poured the coffee and returned to my invisible life. But something in me, maybe the 3 years of education I'd sacrificed, maybe the desperate need to matter just once, made me speak. Sir, I think there might be an error in your paperwork. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. He lifted his head slowly, and I finally saw his face fully. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, and eyes the color of whiskey in dim light. amber threaded with darkness, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, dangerous in the way that fire is dangerous. Those eyes swept over me, and I felt it like a physical touch. Assessment, calculation, the weighing of my worth in a fraction of a second. You read my documents, not a question. A statement delivered in a tone that made my survival instincts scream. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. My throat closed. The coffee pot shook harder in my hand. Put down the pot. Soft command, absolute authority. I obeyed, setting it on the table with a soft clink. My hands immediately went behind my back, fingers twisting together. Classic defensive posture, prey behavior. Show me. He slid the papers toward my side of the table, his movements economical and precise. I shouldn't touch them. Every instinct told me to apologize and run, but he was waiting. And something about the way he waited, perfectly still, coiled tension beneath expensive fabric, told me that running would be worse. With shaking fingers, I pointed to the certificate numbers, here and here. The bankruptcy filing is for the LLC, but 3 pages back, there's a transfer showing the assets moved to a trust with a different certificate number. If you sign this, you'd be declaring bankruptcy for an entity that no longer holds your assets. The debt would follow you personally, but your assets would be unprotected. He finished my sentence, his eyes never leaving my face. Someone moved them. Yes, sir. Silence stretched between us. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. The trucker's cup clinked against his saucer. The overhead lights continued their electric buzz. But in our booth, time seemed suspended. What's your name? His voice had changed. Still quiet, but the edge had shifted from threat to something else. Something I couldn't identify. Emma? Emma Chen? Emma Chen. He repeated it like he was tasting the syllables, storing them somewhere important. Do you know who I am? I swallowed hard. No, sir. A slight curve of his lips. Not quite a smile, too sharp for that. Liar. Because of course I knew. Not his name, perhaps, but what he was. The expensive suit couldn't hide it, the guards couldn't disguise it. The way he occupied space like he owned not just the booth, but the very air we breathed, it all screamed power, wealth, and danger. The kind of man ordinary people like me avoided. The kind who operated in shadows and made people disappear. I don't know your name, I amended quietly. Dante Castellano. He leaned back, studying me with those predator's eyes. And you just saved me from signing away everything I've built. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm glad I could help. Are you? The question felt loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. Do you understand what you've done, Emma Chen? I just pointed out an error. You just revealed that someone in my organization betrayed me. His voice remained soft, but something lethal flickered in his gaze. You just showed me that a poor waitress with sharp eyes knows my business better than the lawyers I pay 6 figures. You just became either very valuable or very dangerous. The blood drained from my face. I won't say anything. I didn't see anything. I'll forget. You can't unknow what you know. He gathered the papers with swift efficiency, straightening them into a neat stack. And I can't unknow that you exist. One of his guards approached the table, a massive man with cold eyes and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He bent low, and Dante whispered something I couldn't hear. The guard's eyes flicked to me, assessment in their depths. Then he nodded once and stepped back. Dante stood, and I realized for the first time how tall he was. 6'2", maybe 6'3", with the kind of presence that filled a room. He extracted a wallet from his inner jacket pocket, soft leather, Italian, and placed $500 bills on the table. For the coffee, he said, his eyes never leaving mine, and your discretion. That's too much. No. He stepped closer, and I smelled him for the first time. Expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker, richer. Aged whiskey and old leather, power and danger wrapped in sophistication. It's not nearly enough. He was close now. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that I could see the small scar on his jaw, the flecks of gold in those amber eyes, the way his pupils dilated slightly as he looked down at me. You're not afraid enough, he observed quietly. That will get you killed. I'm terrified, I whispered. And it was true. My hands trembled, my pulse raced, my breath came shallow, but something else threaded through the fear. Something that felt dangerously like fascination. Good. He reached out and I froze. His fingers were warm as they tilted my chin up, forcing me to hold his gaze. The touch was gentle but absolute. A claim, a warning, a promise. Fear keeps you alive, Emma Chen. Remember that. He released me and turned toward the door. His guards moved in synchronized precision, one leading, one following, the third speaking into his radio. The Mercedes engine purred to life outside. But at the door, Dante paused, looked back over his shoulder. Someone will come for you tomorrow night, he said. Be ready. And then he was gone, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness like smoke, leaving behind only the scent of expensive cologne, $500 I couldn't afford to refuse, and the terrifying certainty that my invisible life had just ended. The bankruptcy papers sat on the table where he'd left them, forgotten in his urgency. No, not forgotten. Left deliberately. Because as I approached on trembling legs to clear the booth, I saw the note written in sharp, elegant handwriting across the top of one document. You see what others miss. That makes you dangerous, or precious. I haven't decided which yet. DC. My fingers traced the letters, and I realized with dawning horror and strange exhilaration that I'd just caught the attention of a man who probably had people killed for far less than reading his private documents. The question wasn't whether I'd be ready tomorrow night. The question was whether I'd survive what came after. I didn't sleep. How could I, when every shadow in my studio apartment felt like it concealed one of Dante Castellano's men, when every car engine on the street below made my heart leap into my throat? I'd stuffed the $500 bills into an envelope and hidden it beneath my mattress like some cliched movie character, as if distance from the money could create distance from what I'd done. But distance was an illusion. I'd seen his papers. I'd read his secrets. I'd touched something I wasn't meant to touch, and now I couldn't unknow it, couldn't unsee the way his amber eyes had studied me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. Couldn't unfeel the ghost of his fingers tilting my chin up, claiming space on my body without asking permission. Be ready, he'd said. But ready for what? The morning crawled by in agonizing slowness. I called in sick to the diner, the first time in 2 years I'd missed a shift. Marcus, my manager, had been annoyed but ultimately indifferent. I was replaceable, invisible, except now, I wasn't invisible anymore, and that terrified me more than poverty ever had. I scrubbed my apartment with manic energy, as if cleaning could somehow restore order to my upended world. I washed dishes that were already clean. I organized the handful of books on my makeshift shelf, business textbooks from my abbreviated college career, dog-eared and underlined, evidence of the person I'd almost been before money ran out and reality crashed in. By noon, I'd convinced myself nothing would happen. That Dante Castellano had been testing me somehow, or that he'd forgotten about the tired waitress who'd pointed out an error. Rich, powerful men didn't remember people like me. We were scenery, backdrop to their important lives. But at 2 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. My hand shook as I answered. Hello? Miss Chen. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Mr. Castellano has arranged for a car to collect you at 8 o'clock this evening. Please be ready. I haven't agreed to. The driver will arrive at 8. A pause, then softer, almost sympathetic. It's not a request, Miss Chen. Mr. Castellano doesn't make requests. The line went dead. I stood frozen in my tiny kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone like it might offer some explanation, some escape route, but there was none. You didn't say no to men like Dante Castellano. That's what the fear crawling up my spine told me. That's what the rational part of my brain, the part that had read enough news stories about missing persons and unsolved murders, screamed I should run, pack a bag, empty my meager bank account, and disappear. Except I had nowhere to go, no family, no savings worth the name, no connections that could hide me from a man who probably had half the city in his pocket. So instead, I did the only thing I could do. I got ready. At 7:30 p.m., I stood before my bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. I'd washed my hair twice, styled it as best I could with my cheap drugstore products, applied makeup with trembling hands. Nothing dramatic, just enough to look presentable. The only dress I owned that wasn't my uniform was a simple black number I'd bought for a job interview 3 years ago. It was slightly too loose now, testament to the weight I'd lost surviving on ramen and coffee, but it was clean and modest. I looked terrified. Young. Desperately out of my depth. Fear keeps you alive, Dante had said. I clung to that now. Let the fear sharpen my senses instead of paralyzing me. At precisely 8 o'clock, a black Mercedes pulled up outside my building. Not the same one from last night. This one was larger, an S-Class with windows tinted so dark they seemed to absorb light. A man emerged from the driver's side and my breath caught. He was massive. 6'5" at least, built like he could break me in half without effort. The same guard from the diner, with the scar bisecting his eyebrow. He wore a dark suit that couldn't quite disguise the weapon at his hip, and his eyes swept my street with professional paranoia before settling on my building's entrance. My phone buzzed. A text from the unknown number. He's waiting. Don't keep Mr. Castellano waiting. I grabbed my purse, a worn leather thing that had belonged to my mother, and descended the 3 flights of stairs on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Each step was a choice. Each choice felt like falling. The guard opened the rear door without a word. The interior smelled of leather and that same expensive cologne I detected on Dante. Cedar and whiskey, danger and wealth. I slid inside, and the door closed with a heavy, final thunk. The guard returned to the driver's seat, and we pulled away from the only life I'd ever known. We didn't speak. The partition between front and back seats was raised, isolating me in luxurious silence. The leather was butter soft beneath my hands. The ride was so smooth I barely felt the road. This was what money bought: insulation from the world's roughness, from its discomfort and chaos. I watched the city pass through tinted windows. We left my neighborhood with its cramped apartments and struggling immigrants, moved through downtown with its glittering towers and expensive restaurants, and continued into an area I'd only seen in magazines: old money, real wealth, where trees lined streets wide enough for history, and homes sat behind gates and walls. The Mercedes turned onto a private drive flanked by massive oaks, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the streetlights into dappled patterns. My heart hammered harder with each passing second. Where was he taking me? What did he want? The house, no, the estate, emerged from the darkness like something from another world. 3 stories of classic architecture, all clean lines and elegant proportions, lit from below by subtle landscape lighting that made it glow against the night sky. Gardens stretched in every direction, manicured to perfection. A fountain gurgled somewhere in the darkness. Wealth whispered from every stone, every window, every carefully planned detail. We stopped before the entrance, where another guard waited. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out on legs that felt like water. The November air was cold against my skin, carrying the scent of late-blooming roses and something else. Chlorine from a pool I couldn't see. Wood smoke from a fireplace. This way, Miss Chen. I followed because I had no choice. Through massive double doors that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. Into a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that cast rainbow prisms across walls, hung with what might have been original artwork. Everything was perfect, clean, expensive. The kind of place where people like me came only to clean or serve. Mr. Castellano is in his study, the guard said, leading me down a hallway lined with more artwork, more evidence of wealth I couldn't fathom. 3rd door on the left. He left me there, alone in a hallway that cost more than I'd earn in my lifetime, staring at a closed door and trying to remember how to breathe. I knocked. Soft, hesitant. Come in, Emma. He knew it was me. Of course he did. Men like Dante Castellano controlled every variable, anticipated every move. I opened the door. The study was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes that looked read rather than decorative. A fire crackled in a fireplace large enough to stand in, and behind a massive desk that probably weighed more than my car sat Dante Castellano, amber eyes tracking my entrance like a predator watching prey enter its den. He'd removed his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that spoke of violence. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it multiple times. He looked tired and dangerous, and somehow more human than he had in the diner. "Close the door," he said quietly. I obeyed, and the soft click of the latch felt like sealing my fate. "Sit." He gestured to one of 2 leather chairs facing his desk. I sat, perching on the edge like a bird ready to flee. My hands twisted in my lap, fingers knotting together. Every instinct screamed that I was in danger, that this man could destroy me with a word, that I'd made a terrible mistake by getting in that car. But I'd also had no choice. Dante studied me in silence, his gaze moving over my face with unnerving intensity. Not sexual. This was different. Assessment, calculation, the weighing of value and risk. "You're afraid," he observed. "Yes. But you came anyway." Did I have a choice? A slight curve of his lips. No. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Do you know why you're here, Emma? To be killed?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. His eyebrows rose. "If I wanted you dead, you'd have died in your apartment. Quietly, cleanly. No one would have found you for days." He delivered this information calmly, as if discussing the weather. "No. You're here because you have a gift I need." "A gift?" "You see things others miss." He tapped the stack of papers on his desk. The bankruptcy documents from the diner, I realized with a jolt. "In 30 seconds, you identified fraud that 3 lawyers and my accountant missed. Fraud that would have cost me everything. I just noticed the numbers. You noticed what trained professionals, people I pay obscene amounts of money, failed to see." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Why?" I swallowed hard. I was a business major, before I had to drop out. I took forensic accounting, corporate law. I learned to look for discrepancies in financial documents, and now you pour coffee for minimum wage. The observation stung, but I lifted my chin. Money ran out. Scholarships don't cover everything. Neither do student loans. So yes, now I pour coffee. It's honest work. Honest work. He repeated the phrase like it was foreign. "When was the last time you ate a real meal, Emma? Not ramen. Not leftovers from the diner. A real meal." The question caught me off guard. "I eat fine." "You're too thin. You have dark circles under your eyes. Your hands shake. Low blood sugar or exhaustion. Probably both." His gaze was clinical now, cataloging my poverty like symptoms of disease. "You work how many hours? That's none of your business. Everything about you became my business the moment you touched those papers." He stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. I tensed, but he simply leaned against the front of the desk, now close enough that I had to look up to meet his eyes. "I investigated you today. Emma Chen, 23, orphaned at 19. No family, no connections, 3 years at Metropolitan State, business major with a 3.9 GPA before you dropped out. You work 70-hour weeks split between 2 jobs, live in a neighborhood where gunshots are white noise, and have exactly $347 in your bank account." Heat flooded my face, shame and anger mixing into something toxic. "Is there a point to humiliating me?" "The point," he said softly, "is that you're smart, desperate, and invisible. The perfect combination." "For what?" "For working for me." The world tilted. "What?" "Someone in my organization betrayed me." His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "Someone with access to my financial documents, my lawyers, my inner circle. They changed those certificate numbers, set up that fraudulent bankruptcy. If you hadn't noticed, I would have signed away everything. My businesses, my properties, my protection. I would have been exposed, vulnerable, dead within a week." I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "I need someone I can trust," Dante continued. "Someone who has no connections to my world, no loyalties that can be exploited, no reason to betray me. Someone smart enough to catch what others miss." His hand moved and I flinched, but he only tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing my cheek. "Someone like you." I can't. Words failed me. "You can, and you will," not a threat. A certainty. "You'll review my financial documents, audit my accounts, find the discrepancies in the lies. You'll help me identify the traitor before they destroy everything I've built. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than people with degrees and decades of experience because you're hungry." His thumb traced my jawline, a possessive touch that made my breath catch. Hungry people pay attention. Hungry people survive. "And if I say no?" His hand dropped away. "You won't." "You're that certain?" "I'm offering you a job that pays more in a month than you currently make in a year. I'm offering you safety, security, a chance to use the education you sacrificed for. I'm offering you visibility, Emma, a chance to matter." He paused. "Tell me you'll refuse that." I couldn't. God help me. I couldn't. Because he was right. I was desperate. I was invisible. And he was offering me everything I'd lost when poverty crushed my dreams. Even if accepting meant stepping into darkness. Even if it meant belonging to a man who spoke of murder like it was mundane. What exactly would I be doing? My voice was barely audible. Dante smiled, and it was beautiful and terrifying. "Saving my life," he said. Again. The office Dante gave me was larger than my apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens bathed in morning light. A mahogany desk that looked like it belonged in a museum sat centered on Persian rugs worth more than I'd earn in 5 years. Leather chairs, a full bookshelf, and a computer setup that made my old laptop look like a relic from the Stone Age. Everything whispered wealth and permanence, a sharp contrast to the temporary, disposable nature of my previous existence. "You'll work here," Dante had said the night before, showing me the space with clinical efficiency. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Weekends if necessary. My accountant will provide you with all relevant documents. Your job is to find what doesn't belong. "And when I find it?" I'd asked. His smile had been cold. "You tell me. Only me. Trust no one else." Now, standing alone in the office at 8:47 a.m., I felt the weight of what I'd agreed to settle over my shoulders like a lead blanket. I'd signed papers last night, employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, documents so dense with legal language I'd barely understood half of it. But the salary number had been clear enough. $15,000 a month. More money than I'd dreamed of making, paid to find a traitor in a criminal empire. Because that's what this was. I wasn't naive enough to believe otherwise. Dante Castellano wasn't a legitimate businessman, despite the legal corporations and proper paperwork. The guards, the guns, the way people moved around him with careful deference. It all pointed to something darker, something dangerous, and I'd walked into it willingly, sold myself for security and the chance to matter. The door opened without warning. I spun, heart leaping, to find a woman entering. She was in her 40s, elegant in a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Cold eyes assessed me with the same clinical precision Dante had used. "Emma Chen." Not a question. "I'm Victoria Russo, Mr. Castellano's senior accountant." She set a stack of boxes on the desk between us, file boxes, at least 6 of them. "These are the financial records for the past 18 months. Bank statements, transfer documents, corporate filings, everything. Your job is to audit them." "All of this?" I stared at the boxes, overwhelmed. "Mr. Castellano believes the fraud began approximately 6 months ago, but we need to establish a baseline, look for patterns, anomalies, anything that seems inconsistent." Her tone was brisk, professional, but something flickered in her eyes. Resentment. "You'll report your findings directly to Mr. Castellano, to no one else." "Not even you?" Her lips thinned. "Especially not me. Mr. Castellano has made it clear that you answer only to him." She moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, Miss Chen. Whatever you think you know about Mr. Castellano, whatever story you've told yourself to justify being here, forget it. This world doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't offer second chances. Be very careful where you step." She left, and I was alone with 6 boxes of secrets, and a warning that felt more like a threat. I spent the morning drowning in numbers. Bank transfers in amounts that made my head spin, hundreds of thousands moving between accounts, corporations buying and selling properties, investment portfolios worth millions. It was overwhelming, a labyrinth of financial complexity designed to obscure rather than illuminate. But I'd always been good with patterns, good at seeing the threads that connected disparate pieces. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand the architecture of Dante's empire. Legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction companies, real estate holdings, functioned as fronts, washing money from sources I didn't want to examine too closely. The structure was elegant, layered with enough legal distance to provide plausible deniability. But someone had been creating gaps in that structure. Small inconsistencies that individually meant nothing. Together, they formed a picture of systematic theft. By lunch, my eyes burned and my head ached. I'd found 3 discrepancies: amounts that didn't match across documents, transfers that appeared in one set of books but not another. Small amounts, easy to miss, but they were there. I was making notes when the door opened again. This time, Dante entered, and the air pressure in the room seemed to change. He wore another expensive suit, this one charcoal gray that made his amber eyes look almost gold. 2 guards flanked him, but he dismissed them with a gesture, closing the door behind him. Progress? He moved to my desk, looking down at my notes. Maybe. I showed him the discrepancies, explained what I'd found. He listened with absolute focus, his eyes tracking my words like they were prey. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "These transfers," he said finally, pointing to one of my notes. "They went to a subsidiary account. Who has access to those accounts?" According to the documentation, only 3 people: you, Victoria Russo, and someone named Marco De Luca. Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. "Marco is my second in command, my oldest friend. We grew up together. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to suggest. Don't apologize for doing your job." His hand covered mine where it rested on the desk, warm and possessive. "This is exactly why you're here. To see what I'm too close to see." His touch sent electricity up my arm. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Couldn't. There was something magnetic about him, something that overrode common sense and self-preservation. "Have you eaten?" he asked suddenly. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." His thumb stroked across my knuckles, a gesture that felt both casual and intimate. "You skipped breakfast. I know because I had someone check your apartment this morning. Empty refrigerator, nothing but instant coffee and old crackers." Heat flooded my face. "You had someone break into my apartment?" "I had someone ensure your safety." He released my hand and straightened. "Come, lunch. I should keep working. Emma." He said my name like a command. "Come." I followed because I was learning that you didn't argue with Dante Castellano. Not when he used that tone. Not when his eyes held that particular intensity that suggested refusal wasn't actually an option. He led me through the estate to a dining room that could have seated 20 but was set for 2. Crystal glasses, fine china, silver that probably cost more than my car. A woman in a white uniform brought food, real food, the kind I'd forgotten existed. Grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven, a salad with ingredients I couldn't name. "Eat," Dante commanded, taking the seat across from me. I did, and the first bite nearly made me weep. Flavor exploded on my tongue, butter and herbs and perfectly cooked fish. I hadn't realized how hungry I was, how long I'd been surviving rather than living. I ate with embarrassing enthusiasm while Dante watched, barely touching his own food. "When did you last have a meal like this?" he asked. "Years." The word came out thick with emotion I couldn't suppress. "Before my mother died. She used to cook, nothing fancy but real food. After she was gone, I couldn't afford ingredients. Couldn't afford the time. Tell me about her." The request surprised me. "Why?" "Because I want to know." He leaned back, studying me with that unnerving intensity. "You're working for me now, Emma. You're in my home, handling my secrets. I should know who you are." It felt like a trap, but I answered anyway. Told him about my mother, an immigrant who'd worked 3 jobs to put me through school, about losing her to cancer that we couldn't afford to treat properly, about the debt that buried me, the dreams that died with her, the slow descent into poverty and invisibility. Dante listened without interrupting, his amber eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You loved her," he said finally. "More than anything. Love is dangerous." He stood, moving around the table to stand beside my chair. "It makes you vulnerable, gives your enemies leverage." "Is that why you don't love anyone?" The question escaped before I could stop it. His hand touched my shoulder, fingers curling into my hair, not painful, but possessive, claiming, "I love many things, Emma. Power, control, loyalty." His fingers tightened slightly. "I protect what's mine with absolute ruthlessness. That's not love. It's ownership." My pulse hammered in my throat. "Am I yours now?" "From the moment you touched those papers." "Yes." He released me, but the phantom touch lingered. "Finish eating, then back to work. I want a full report by tomorrow." He left, and I sat alone in that elegant dining room, finishing a meal that tasted like both salvation and chains. The afternoon blurred into evening. I found more discrepancies, patterns emerging from the chaos. Small thefts over months, amounts that individually seemed insignificant, but collectively totaled nearly $2 million. And all of them led back to accounts accessible by only 3 people: Dante, Victoria, Marco. At 7 p.m., exhausted and overwhelmed, I finally stopped. My eyes burned, my head pounded, and fear sat heavy in my chest because I was finding the traitor, and when I did, someone would die. That's what happened in Dante's world. That's what I'd signed up for, whether I wanted to admit it or not. I was gathering my notes when the door opened. Not Dante this time, but the scarred guard from the diner. Up close, he was even more intimidating, 6'5" of muscle and menace, with eyes that had seen too much death. "Mr. Castellano wants to see you," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for someone so dangerous. "Where?" "His private quarters. I'll take you." My stomach dropped. Private quarters meant something different than an office or dining room, something more intimate, more dangerous. I followed the guard through corridors I hadn't seen before, away from the public spaces and into what felt like the heart of the estate. We climbed stairs to the 3rd floor, where thick carpet muffled our footsteps and artwork worth millions hung in shadows. He stopped before a door at the end of the hallway. "He's expecting you." Then he left, and I was alone again, staring at a closed door and trying to control my breathing. I knocked. "Come in, Emma." The room beyond was a bedroom suite larger than most apartments. A massive bed dominated one wall, covered in dark sheets that looked like silk. A fireplace crackled with real flames. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights in the distance, a glittering reminder of the world I'd left behind. Dante stood by those windows, silhouetted against the lights. He'd removed his jacket and tie, unbuttoned his shirt to mid-chest. The firelight played across his skin, highlighting scars I hadn't noticed before, evidence of violence, of a life lived in darkness. "Close the door," he said without turning. I obeyed, my hands shaking. "Come here." I crossed the room on legs that felt disconnected from my body, stopped a few feet from him, maintaining distance that felt desperately important. He turned then, and his eyes were molten in the firelight. "You're afraid of me." "Yes." "Good." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. "But you're also curious. I can see it in your eyes, the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. I don't—" His finger pressed against my lips, silencing me. "Don't lie, Emma. I've had people killed for less, but with you, I find dishonesty almost disappointing." He traced my bottom lip with his thumb, a touch that felt both gentle and possessive. My breath came faster, fear and something else, something dangerous, coiling in my stomach. "Do you know what you are?" he murmured, his other hand sliding into my hair, cradling the back of my head. "You're an impossibility, a poor waitress with a gift for seeing truth, a ghost who became visible to me, a liability I should eliminate, except I find myself unwilling to let you go. Mr. Castellano, Dante." His grip tightened in my hair, not painful but firm, controlling. "Dante. Say my name, Emma." It came out as a whisper. "Better." He smiled, and it was beautiful and terrifying. "You're going to find my traitor, and when you do, you're going to understand exactly what kind of man you've agreed to work for." What kind of monster you've let into your life?" "I already know," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Do you?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin. "Then why are you still here? Why didn't you run?" "Because I had nowhere to go. Because he'd offered me something I couldn't refuse. Because despite the fear, despite knowing what he was, some broken part of me was drawn to his darkness like a moth to flame." "I don't know," I whispered. "Liar." He released me abruptly, stepping back. "Go home, Emma. Rest. Tomorrow, we continue hunting." I fled, and his soft laughter followed me into the hallway like a promise, or a threat. 3 weeks passed in a blur of numbers and nightmares. I found the pattern. It was elegant in its simplicity, brutal in its betrayal. Someone had been skimming money for 8 months, creating shell accounts that mirrored Dante's legitimate holdings just closely enough to avoid immediate detection. Small amounts at first, 10,000 here, 20,000 there, but it had escalated. The bankruptcy fraud was meant to be the final play, the coup that would leave Dante exposed and vulnerable while someone else walked away with everything he'd built. The evidence pointed to Marco De Luca, Dante's second in command, his oldest friend, the man he trusted more than anyone in his organization. I sat in my office at midnight, staring at the documents spread across my desk, and felt sick. Because presenting this evidence meant condemning a man to death. That's how Dante's world worked. Betrayal was answered with blood, and I would be the instrument of that justice. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, my study. Now. I'd learned that Dante worked strange hours, conducting business when the rest of the world slept. I'd also learned that his summons weren't optional. So I gathered my evidence with shaking hands and made my way through the silent estate to his study. He was waiting, seated behind his massive desk, amber eyes tracking my entrance. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. A glass of whiskey sat at his elbow, half empty. In the 3 weeks I'd worked for him, I'd never seen him drink. "You found something," he said, not a question. "Yes." I set the documents on his desk, my hands trembling. "I found everything." He didn't look at the papers, just kept his eyes on me, studying my face. "Tell me." So I did. Explain the shell accounts, the systematic theft, the careful construction of fraud that had nearly destroyed him. Showed him the trail of evidence that led, inexorably, to Marco De Luca. My voice shook as I spoke, and by the end, I felt like I might vomit. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his glass and drained it in one swallow. "Marco," he said softly. "My brother and everything but blood. I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "Don't be." He stood, moving to the bar cart against the wall, poured another drink with steady hands. "You did your job. You found the truth." He turned back to me. "Do you know what the penalty for betrayal is in my world, Emma?" "Death," I whispered. "Not just death. Pain first. Examples must be made. Messages sent." He drank, and something terrible flickered in his eyes. "I've done it before. Killed men who betrayed me. Watched them beg. It's necessary. Expected. But this is different." I could hear it in his voice, see it in the tension of his shoulders. "This is Marco." He set down the glass with a soft click. "The boy who took a beating for me when we were 12. The man who stood beside me when I built this empire from nothing. My friend." "I'm sorry," I said again, helpless. "Stop apologizing." He moved toward me with predatory grace. "You did nothing wrong. You saw what needed to be seen. You were honest when everyone else around me lied." His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "You're the only person I can trust, Emma. Do you understand that? The only one?" The weight of that statement settled over me like a shroud. His only trustworthy person was a poor waitress he'd known for 3 weeks. A woman who'd stumbled into his world by accident and stayed out of desperation. "What will you do?" I asked. "What I have to." His hand dropped away, and he turned toward the windows. "Marco will die, but first, I need to know why. Who he's working with, what he hoped to gain." He paused. "I need him to think he's still trusted." That means you tell no one what you've found. Not Victoria, not my guards, no one. Of course. There's a gala tomorrow night, annual fundraiser for one of my legitimate charities, a hospital foundation. The city's elite will be there, politicians, businessmen, people who pretend not to know what I am while taking my money. He looked back at me. You'll attend, as my guest. My heart stuttered. I'm not asking, Emma. His voice was soft but absolute. You'll be at my side. Visible, protected. And while we smile and dance and pretend to be civilized, you'll watch Marco, study him, help me understand how I miss this. I don't have anything to wear to a gala. A slight smile curved his lips. That's been handled. A dress will be delivered to your apartment in the morning. Hair and makeup will arrive at 5 p.m., car at 7. You've thought of everything. I always do. He moved closer again, and I found myself trapped between him and the desk. There's something else you should know. Marco has been asking about you, who you are, why I hired you. He's suspicious. Fear spiked through me. Is he dangerous? Everyone in my world is dangerous, Emma, including me. His hand settled on my waist, holding me in place. Especially me. But I protect what's mine with absolute ruthlessness, and you're mine now. Understand? I nodded, unable to speak. Say it. His fingers tightened on my waist, possessive and claiming. Say you understand that you belong to me. I belong to you. The words should have felt like defeat, but they came out steady. Certain, because they were true. From the moment I'd touched those papers in the diner, I'd become his. For better or worse. Good. He released me abruptly. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow night you'll meet my world, and it will try to eat you alive. The dress arrived in a box that probably cost more than my rent. Midnight blue silk that looked like liquid starlight, with a neckline that plunged just enough to be daring without being scandalous. Shoes that were definitely designer, with red soles that I recognized from magazines. Jewelry. A diamond necklace that had to be real, because fake diamonds didn't catch light like captured fire. I stood in my tiny apartment, staring at thousands of dollars worth of clothing, and felt the weight of transformation. This wasn't just a dress, it was armor. A costume that would let me pass in a world where I didn't belong. The hair and makeup team arrived at 5, as promised. 2 women who descended on me with professional efficiency, transforming my usual appearance into something almost unrecognizable. They swept my dark hair into an elegant updo, applied makeup that made my eyes look larger and my cheekbones more pronounced. By the time they finished, I looked like someone else, someone who might actually belong at Dante Castellano's side. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Dante probably knew my measurements better than I did. The silk whispered against my skin as I moved, and the heels added 3 inches to my height. I stared at my reflection and saw a stranger, someone confident, someone visible, someone who was about to step into the lion's den. The Mercedes arrived at 7 sharp. Same driver, same tinted windows. But this time, when I slid into the back seat, Dante was waiting. He wore a tuxedo that looked custom-made, because it probably was. Every line was perfect, from the sharp cut of the jacket to the precise knot of his bow tie. His hair was styled back from his face, making his features look even more aristocratic. Dangerous and beautiful, like a blade wrapped in velvet. His eyes swept over me, and something heated flared in their amber depths. You look... He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. Acceptable. But his hand found mine in the darkness, fingers threading through mine with possessive certainty, and the way he looked at me suggested I was far more than acceptable. We drove in silence to the Rothmore Hotel, one of the city's most exclusive venues. The circular drive was packed with luxury cars and people in evening wear. Cameras flashed as politicians and socialites emerged, heading into the glittering entrance. This was where the powerful gathered, where deals were made beneath the veneer of charity and sophistication. Remember, Dante said softly as we pulled up to the entrance, you're with me. That means you're untouchable, but it also means everyone will be watching. Judging. Looking for weakness. What should I do? Stay close. Say little. Watch everything. His hand squeezed mine. And don't let go. The driver opened the door, and we emerged into chaos. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Voices called out questions. But Dante moved through it all with absolute confidence, his hand at the small of my back, guiding me forward. His touch was possessive, claiming, broadcasting ownership to everyone watching. Inside, the hotel ballroom was a fantasy of crystal chandeliers and golden light. Hundreds of people in evening wear milled about, champagne glasses in hand, their laughter echoing off marble floors. An orchestra played softly in one corner. Waiters in white jackets circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than my usual meals, and everyone stared at us, at Dante, because he commanded attention simply by existing, and at me, because I was the mystery. The unknown woman at Dante Castellano's side. Dante. A man approached, silver-haired, expensive suit, politician's smile. Wonderful event. The hospital board is thrilled with your continued generosity. Senator Morrison. Dante's voice was perfectly cordial, but his hand never left my back. Allow me to introduce Emma Chen. She's consulting on some financial projects for my organization. The senator's eyes swept over me with calculating interest. Charming. Are you new to the city, Miss Chen? Born and raised, I said, keeping my voice steady. Indeed. And where did you study? The question felt like a trap, like he was trying to place me in the hierarchy. Determine if I belonged. Metropolitan State. Business major. Something dismissive flickered in his eyes. Not Ivy League. Not one of them. But he smiled anyway. Well, any friend of Dante's is always welcome in our city. He moved on, and Dante leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. He's invested in 3 of my construction projects and takes a 10% kickback. His moral superiority is purchased with my money. I should have been shocked. But I was learning that this world ran on hypocrisy and carefully maintained illusions. We moved through the crowd, and Dante introduced me to dozens of people whose names I immediately forgot. Businessmen, socialites, city officials. All of them smiled and made polite conversation while their eyes calculated my worth and found me wanting. But Dante never left my side. His hand remained at my back or holding mine, a constant reminder that I was under his protection, that I belonged to him. And then I saw Marco De Luca. He was tall and handsome in a rough way, with dark eyes and a scar on his chin. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, shaking hands and laughing at jokes. Everything about him screamed loyalty and competence. This was Dante's second in command, his closest friend, his betrayer, Marco. Dante's voice was warm as the man approached. Good to see you, boss. Marco embraced Dante briefly, then his eyes fell on me. And who's this? Emma Chen. My new financial consultant. Dante's hand tightened on my waist. Emma, this is Marco De Luca, my right hand. Pleasure. Marco extended his hand, and I shook it, trying not to flinch. His grip was firm, his smile charming, but his eyes were calculating, assessing. Dante's been keeping you secret, Marco said, releasing my hand. Makes me wonder what else he's hiding. Just being cautious, Dante replied smoothly. Emma has a unique skill set. I wanted to ensure she was properly integrated before making introductions. Integrated? Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. Interesting choice of words. He looked at me. What exactly do you do for Dante, Miss Chen? I review financial documents. Look for inconsistencies. Something flashed in Marco's eyes. Too quick to identify, but it was there. Fear? Anger? Find any? A few. I kept my voice light, casual. Nothing significant yet. Yet. He repeated the word, then looked at Dante. Always thorough, aren't you, boss? Always. Dante's voice held an edge I'd learned to recognize. Danger wrapped in civility. Marco excused himself, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. He knows, I whispered. Yes. Dante's hand slid up my spine, possessive and comforting. He suspects you're the threat, which means he'll try to neutralize you. Fear spiked through me. What does that mean? It means... He pulled me closer, his lips brushing my temple in a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt protective. That you don't leave my sight. Not tonight. Not until this is finished. The orchestra began playing a waltz. Couples moved onto the dance floor, spinning in elegant circles beneath the chandeliers. Dante led me onto the floor without asking. His hand found mine, the other settling at my waist, and we began to move. I'd never learned to waltz, but he guided me with absolute confidence, his body leading mine through steps I didn't know. "You're trembling," he murmured. "I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you alert." His hand tightened on my waist, pulling me closer until we were almost indecent. "But I won't let anything happen to you, Emma. You're too valuable." Valuable. The word tasted bitter. Is that all I am? A useful tool? His eyes met mine, and something dangerous burned in their depths. "If that's all you were, I'd keep you locked in an office, safe, hidden." We spun, and his hand slid lower on my back, possessive. "But I find myself wanting you visible, wanting everyone to see that you're mine. That's not about value, Emma. That's about possession. I'm not a thing to be owned, no." His lips curved into a smile that was almost tender. "Almost. You're a person I've claimed anyway. There's a difference." We danced in silence, spinning through light and shadow while the city's elite watched and judged. And somewhere in that crowd, Marco DeLuca plotted my death. Because I'd seen too much, known too much, become too dangerous. The only thing standing between me and a bullet was the man holding me in his arms, the monster who'd decided I belonged to him. The attack came 3 days later. I was leaving the estate at 9 p.m., exhausted from another day of compiling evidence. Dante had asked me to stay, insisted actually, his hand lingering on my wrist in a gesture that felt more like need than possession. But I'd refused, needing space from the intensity of him, from the way his presence seemed to consume all the oxygen in any room we shared. The scarred guard, I'd learned his name was Anton, drove me home in the usual Mercedes. We took the same route we always did, through downtown and into my neighborhood. I was half asleep in the back seat, lulled by exhaustion and the smooth ride, when Anton's voice cut through the silence. "Miss Chen, get down, now. Training." I didn't know I had kicked in. I dropped to the floor just as the rear window exploded in a shower of glass. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks that seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. Anton swerved violently, and I was thrown against the door, pain exploding in my shoulder. More gunfire. The Mercedes accelerated, engine roaring. I stayed down, arms wrapped around my head, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. This was real. Someone was trying to kill me. The theoretical danger of Dante's world had become concrete, immediate, lethal. The car swerved again, tires squealing. Anton was shouting into his radio, rapid Italian I couldn't understand. More gunfire, closer now. A bullet punched through the door inches from my head, and I screamed. Then we were moving faster, the engine's roar drowning out everything else. The gunfire faded. Anton took corners at speeds that defied physics, the Mercedes suspension working overtime. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, we stopped. "Miss Chen." Anton's voice was steady despite the chaos. "Are you hurt?" I did a mental inventory. Bruised shoulder, cuts from flying glass, terror that made my hands shake, but alive. "I don't think so. Stay down. We're not at your apartment. We're going back to the estate." The drive back was a blur. Anton called ahead, his voice calm as he reported the attack. By the time we pulled through the gates, the entire property was on high alert. Guards with automatic weapons patrolled the grounds. Floodlights had been activated, turning night into harsh day. Dante was waiting at the entrance. He yanked open my door before the car fully stopped, his hands on me immediately, checking for injuries with clinical efficiency. His face was a mask of controlled fury, amber eyes blazing with something that looked dangerously like fear. "Where are you hit?" His hands moved over my arms, my shoulders, searching for wounds. "I'm not. I'm fine. Just glass." "You're bleeding." He touched my temple, and his fingers came away red, inside. "Now." He didn't wait for agreement, just lifted me from the car like I weighed nothing and carried me into the estate. I should have protested, insisted I could walk, but shock was setting in, and I found myself clinging to him, my face pressed against his chest, breathing in cedar and whiskey and safety. He took me to his private quarters, setting me on the edge of his massive bed with unexpected gentleness. A first aid kit appeared. Where from, I didn't know, and he began cleaning the cuts on my face and hands with careful precision. "It was Marco," I whispered. "I know." His voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "Anton got the license plate. The car belongs to one of Marco's associates." He tilted my face up, examining a cut near my hairline. "He tried to kill you, Emma. My oldest friend tried to murder you because you discovered his betrayal. What will you do? What I should have done weeks ago." He applied antiseptic to the cut, and I hissed at the sting. "End this. Tonight." Fear spiked through me, not for myself, but for what I was about to witness. "Dante, you'll stay here." He finished bandaging my wounds and stood. "Anton will be outside your door. 2 more guards at the stairs. No one gets to you. Understand? You're going to kill him. Yes. No hesitation. No remorse. Just cold certainty. Because of me. Because he betrayed me." Dante's hand cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek with surprising tenderness. "Because he stole from me. Because he tried to destroy everything I've built. And yes, because he tried to take what's mine." His eyes bored into me. "You're mine, Emma. I've claimed you. That means anyone who tries to hurt you dies screaming." He left before I could respond, and I sat alone in his bedroom, trembling with shock, and something that felt horribly like satisfaction. I waited for 3 hours. Anton brought me tea I couldn't drink and food I couldn't eat. He said nothing about what was happening elsewhere in the estate, but I could hear it. Raised voices in the distance, the slam of doors, footsteps heavy with purpose. Dante's empire mobilizing for war. At midnight, the door opened. Dante entered, and my breath caught. Blood stained his white shirt, not much. Just a few drops on the sleeve, but enough to tell me what had happened. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. His hair was disheveled, but his eyes were calm, almost peaceful. "It's done," he said simply. I should have asked for details, should have demanded to know exactly what he'd done to Marco, but I found I didn't want to know, didn't want to carry those images in my head. "Thank you," I whispered instead. He moved toward me, and I saw the exhaustion in the set of his shoulders, the lines around his eyes. He'd killed his oldest friend tonight for me. Because I'd been useful enough, valuable enough, important enough to warrant that ultimate act of protection. Or was it something else? Something neither of us was ready to name. "You're staying here," Dante said, beginning to unbutton his blood-stained shirt. "Not your apartment. Here, where I can protect you." "For how long?" "Until I say otherwise." The shirt came off, revealing a torso marked with scars. Bullet wounds, knife wounds, evidence of a violent life. There may be others involved. Marco had allies. Until I root them all out, you stay under my protection, Dante. Don't argue, Emma. He moved to his bathroom, turned on the sink. I watched as he washed blood from his hands with methodical care. "You almost died tonight because of me. Because I brought you into this world. I won't make that mistake again." I stood on shaking legs and moved to the bathroom doorway. Watched him scrub Marco's blood from his skin like it was a stain that could be removed with enough soap and water. "Do you regret it?" I asked quietly. "Killing him?" He was silent for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that someone I loved betrayed me so completely." He dried his hands and turned to face me. "But I don't regret protecting you. I'd do it again. I'd kill 100 men if that's what it took to keep you safe." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to examine. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why do you care so much? I'm just a waitress you hired 3 weeks ago." "You were never just anything." He moved toward me, backing me against the doorframe. "From the moment you saw what others missed, you became essential. From the moment you looked at me without fear, with curiosity instead of terror, You became interesting. And from the moment I realized I'd rather kill my oldest friend than lose you. He stopped, seemed to struggle with words. You became something I can't name, something I don't know how to handle. His hand cupped my face, and I leaned into the touch despite every rational thought screaming at me to run. Because this was Dante Castellano. A man who'd just killed someone he loved. A man who dealt in violence and fear and power. But when he looked at me, I didn't see the monster. I saw exhaustion and need, and something almost like vulnerability. I should leave, I whispered. Find a new city. Start over where your world can't touch me. You could. His thumb traced my bottom lip. I wouldn't stop you. Wouldn't force you to stay, but I hope you won't. The admission seemed to cost him. I hope you'll stay. Not because I've claimed you or because you're useful, but because... He stopped, searching for words. Because when you're here, I feel less like the monster everyone believes me to be. My heart cracked open, because I understood. God help me, I understood. He'd given me safety and purpose and visibility. And I'd given him something he probably hadn't felt in years, the possibility of being seen as human, rather than just feared. I'll stay, I said. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Relief flickered in his eyes, quickly masked. Your apartment lease ends next month. You'll move your things here. Take one of the guest suites on this floor, close enough that I know you're safe, close enough that you can control me, I corrected. Yes. No apology, no pretense. I'm not a good man, Emma. I won't pretend to be. I'll be possessive and demanding and probably suffocating. I'll watch your every move and eliminate any threat to your safety with extreme prejudice. I'll own you in ways that would horrify normal people. And if I'm not normal? The question surprised us both. A slow smile curved his lips, genuine this time, warm with something that looked dangerously like affection. Then maybe we deserve each other. He kissed me then. Not gentle, not asking permission. Claiming. Possessive. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me against him with controlled force. I should have resisted, should have maintained some dignity, some distance, but I kissed him back with equal hunger, my hands fisting in his hair, years of invisibility and poverty and fear melting away under his touch. He tasted like whiskey and danger and darkness, and I wanted more, wanted everything. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. Bed, he commanded softly. You need rest. Your bed? My bed, where I can make sure you're safe. He saw my hesitation and added, I'll take the chair, but you're sleeping where I can protect you. Too exhausted to argue, I let him guide me to the massive bed. The sheets were silk, cool against my overheated skin. He covered me with a blanket that probably cost more than my monthly rent, then settled into the chair by the window, a gun appearing in his hand from somewhere. Sleep, Emma, he said quietly. I'll watch. And strangely, impossibly, I did. 6 months later, I stood in Dante's study, my study now, really, since I'd taken over most of his financial operations, and reviewed the quarterly reports. The organization was thriving. The traitors had been rooted out. Marco's attempted coup had been crushed, and Dante's empire was stronger than ever. I'd moved into the estate permanently. Not the guest suite. Dante's suite. His bed. His life. We'd stopped pretending there was distance between us sometime around month 3, when he'd pulled me into his arms after a particularly long day and simply held me like I was something precious rather than possessed. I still worked, still managed his finances, still caught the discrepancies others missed. But I was more than his accountant now. I was his partner, his confidant, the person he trusted with his secrets and his fears and the rare moments of vulnerability he allowed himself. I'd learned to navigate his darkness, learned that possessiveness could feel like safety, that control could coexist with care, learned that monsters were sometimes just broken men who'd never learned another way to love. Working late? Dante's voice came from the doorway. I turned to find him leaning against the frame, jacket discarded, tie loosened, still beautiful. Still dangerous, but mine in ways that transcended possession. Finishing the quarterly review, we're up 18%. We. He smiled, moving into the room. I like when you say we. Well, I do run half your empire now. I set down my pen and stood. Someone has to keep you from bankrupting yourself with impulsive acquisitions. Is that what you do? He pulled me into his arms, and I went willingly, fitting against him like I'd been designed for this exact purpose, keep me from destroying myself, among other things. I tilted my face up for his kiss, and he obliged, his lips warm and familiar against mine. I love you, he said against my mouth. Not the first time he'd said it, but still rare enough to feel precious. My impossible waitress who saw what others missed. I love you too, I whispered back. My impossible monster who taught me I deserved to be seen. We stood there in the study, wrapped in each other, while the city glittered beyond the windows. Two broken people who'd found something like wholeness in each other's darkness. Not a fairy tale. Those didn't exist in Dante's world. But something real. Something that had been forged in fear and tempered with trust. I'd started as invisible, a ghost moving through a world that didn't see me. But Dante had made me visible, given me power and safety and purpose. And in return, I'd given him something he'd never had, someone who saw the man beneath the monster and loved him anyway. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't healthy by conventional standards, but it was ours, and that was enough.